Good evening, welcome to the course. This is John Milburn. This is Laws 11046, Law and the Environment. And tonight we have a number of people online. Please feel free to unmute your microphone or to use the chat facility at the bottom of the Zoom page to ask any questions or make any comments. Now, while much of what I have to say will be to camera, that doesn't mean that I don't invite discussions. In fact, my preference is to conduct these sessions in a conversational manner and to engage in discussion. So please feel free to ask any questions, either live by unmuting the microphone or using the chat facility. And for those of you watching the recorded session, hopefully you can join us live at some stage. I think it's always better if you can. Now, the course layout is in the landing page of Moodle. I guess you've probably gleaned something from me from that page, but you'll see that I'm a practicing lawyer. I'm also a sessional member of a tribunal, QCAT, nationally accredited mediator, and I have a few other positions as well. I've taught this subject in a number of forms as environmental law or planning and environmental law for a few years now. So it's an interesting subject, it's an important subject, and I hope you enjoy it. I apologise in advance that there is a lot of reading material. I fully appreciate that. I hope you're not daunted by that. Part of what I've tried to do in relation to our text, environmental law in Australia, by Bates, is to provide my take on what are the important parts in each chapter. It's not all the way through, it's most of it. And that will at least give you an idea of what I think are the important parts of the chapter. You may disagree. Please read the material independently, but refer to my notes if you wish, or to my audio commentary if you wish. Now, the focus of the course is for the people that want to either practice in law, which is perhaps unlikely, but or at least those who wish to engage with or maybe even instruct those who do practice in law. I do teach this subject in a form in environmental law for the law school. What we have in this course is similar. It's watered down. There's not nearly as much content. Now that may surprise you because there's a lot of content still, but I think more than enough. But just rest assured that in the law school, we go into more depth. There's more material there as well. Many of you have no doubt used Moodle before. Some of you may have used Zoom. Not sure if you've used uCrew. The basic idea of uCrew is that's where we have our chats. So I've disabled a Q&A session or section of Moodle. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you wish to contribute something, please do that through uCrew. There are a few things that I would like you to do through Moodle. Your assessment pieces, you upload those through Moodle, and each week we have the problems, and if you could provide some comments, nothing too extensive, but some comments towards the problems each week in Moodle, upload your responses there, but other than that it's pretty much uCrew for our discussions. And if you want to contact me, unless there's a very good reason to send me an email, why not ask the question in uCrew. That way, any response that I can give is for the class to consider generally. And also, it's remarkable how many times students come up with some great answers to help each other. And I do encourage collaboration. So I love to see the discussions through uCrew for this course. Now, I'm going to take you through the Moodle page briefly. It's all fairly self-explanatory. There is a lot there. I won't keep all of the material there for the whole course, so you may see progressively the material is whittled away and other material may take its place. But let me say this to you, exam preparation starts now. In this course you have 2 assignments, both worth 25% as I recall, and the exam, an invigilated examination during the examination period is worth 50%. So start your examination preparation now. I know it's a long way off, but during the course, particularly in these Zoom sessions, I will provide you with hints as to what might be in the examination. Now, there's a couple of things you can do. The first is, if I give a hint as the exam, why not keep a folder or a document so that you can record when the hint was given, when I gave the hint, and whereabouts it were, what week it was, and what it related to, rather. The other thing is that in uploading these sessions onto uCrew, you might have noticed that there are some drop-downs, at least for me they appear as drop-downs, for different topics, and one of those topics is examination. So if I talk about the exam, I will try to remember to tick the box to say this session relates to the examination. Now, onto the Moodle site, what I'm going to do is just test the Zoom by sharing the screen, and with any luck, you should now see my other screen. I use two screens, and that other screen has the Moodle page there. So it's all pretty well self-explanatory. There's a lot there, I apologise, but just some basics. Your assessment pieces, of course, here in the top left-hand corner, and that's where you should access the assessment and you should upload your response. Now, I don't allow for draft assessment pieces, so I won't mark a draft, but I do expect you to upload your assessment in Word format using that facility. Other than that, it may well be quite familiar to you, what we have here. If you have any problems, then bear in mind that there's a lot of help. Learning and Teaching Services, for example, provide some good assistance as well. Now, down the page, you'll see some YouTube videos. You'll see the course objectives, some commentary about uCrew, why I use it, how we use it, how to access it, etc. The course outline, of course, and the prescribed text, which is Jerry Bates' publication. In my view, an excellent publication. I will talk about some others in a moment, but that's an excellent one. Look, a few years ago now, I had a chat with Kelly Stidderford, who was our law librarian at the time, and I've kept this legal research YouTube video. It's quite extensive, it's quite detailed, but you might find it useful if you want to know something about the way in which to research in law. Then we have our Zoom sessions, of course. It will be the same recurring meeting link each week. There's no reason, I think you can come on board, and I assume that you're able to talk to each other before I joined. Was that the case? Is anyone able to tell me whether you're able to chat to each other, or you had to wait for me to join?
No, I think we could. I just didn't have anyone to talk to.
Okay, no, that's good. And the reason I mention that is that you don't have to wait for me. If you want to go online at, I don't know, 5:30 Queensland time instead of 6, then perhaps that might be an opportunity to do that. And you can have a chat to each other and form some links as well. All right, so now through the assessment process, we've got the two assessments, one in week 8, one in week 11, and I'm pretty fussy when it comes to timeliness. I guess it's the lawyer in me. I expect that you will submit your work on time. But look, if you don't worry. You will lose 5% per day for late submission. But I must warn you about this. After 9 days, or it might be 10 days, so 9 days, there will be a cut-off, and that is the Saturday week. So all of my assessment work is due on a Thursday, 11:45 p.m. So then if you're late, you've got the following weekend and then the following Saturday, and the following week and then the Saturday, and you could submit. But if you don't submit by the Saturday week, then it'll be locked off and you will get a 0 mark. So if you can't submit your work on time, just bear in mind you'll lose 5% per day, which is annoying, but it's not the end of the world. I'm notoriously tough on extension applications. You can assume that you will not be given an extension if you apply, particularly if you apply at the last minute. I have some guidelines. I might see if I can publish those guidelines if you want. But essentially, you need to have a very good reason to get an extension. So I'm very good and approachable in many ways, but I'm pretty tough when it comes to having work submitted on time. Part of the reason for that is that I'm a litigation lawyer. And if you've got a trial date starting on a certain date, or you've got something that needs to be filed on a certain date, then rarely are you given any indulgence. being a bit ill, having the flu the week before, just simply doesn't cut it in practice. So excuse the lawyer in me coming out in that regard. I'm also a little bit fussy when it comes to presentation of assignments. You've probably picked that up if you've seen the Moodle page, and I've got some guidelines that I encourage you to follow. Look, they're only guidelines. If you feel that what I have suggested is not right for you, then feel free to ignore it. But at least you'll know what I look for in terms of assignment work. Again, and I'm sorry I keep talking about being a lawyer, but part of it is that as a lawyer, you know, charging $400 or $500 an hour, people expect to see something that looks a certain way. If there are spelling mistakes, grammatical errors, inconsistency in the font or the headings, the spacings that shouldn't be there, things of that nature, then people wonder why on earth they're paying large amounts of money in those circumstances. And I'll just get you to, hi David, I'll just get you to mute your microphone if you would, Dave. Down the bottom left-hand side if you can. Otherwise I'll jump in and see if I can do that for you. Thank you. And what I'll do shortly is I'll go to gallery view. I think at the moment you can just see my Moodle page, but soon we'll go to gallery view, and if you wouldn't mind just taking the camera off so we could see you, that would be great, but you don't have to. And of course it is being all recorded and uploaded through YouTube, so just bear that in mind as well. Okay, so are there any questions? And I'm going to go to gallery view now. Oh, I better stop the share first, sorry. I'm getting my act together here eventually. Now you should be able to see me again, is that right? You can see me? I'll just go to gallery view so we can see each other. Please feel free to show us your face if you want to. And welcome to the course. Really appreciate you having here. Now, are there any questions about what I've run through very quickly on Moodle? Are there any issues there, or is it easy enough? All good? Okay, excellent. I mentioned the exam preparation starts now. I've mentioned extensions. You'll see the dates in the material. Just go to speaker view now. Some other publications. Look, this is our text. It's really quite huge, 900 odd pages. But I think it's very readable, but don't be daunted by it. I know it's a lot of reading. Now, probably the last thing you want me to do now is tell you about other text materials, but I'm going to, and I'll upload this commentary. So if you wanted to extend your reading, then here is a brief rundown of some of the other text, and I'll put these on the U-Crew. So Sustainable Planning in Queensland. It's a short text by Philippa England, Federation Press. It's really a very good read. One problem with it is that, and you're going to love this, the main piece of legislation in Queensland is the Sustainable Planning Act 2009. And that's about to be repealed, sorry. So much of what we learn will be subject to change when the Planning Act becomes law. But we have to teach law as it is now, but we'll keep an eye on what it might be in the future. And the Sustainable Planning in Queensland publication is based on Sustainable Planning Act, even goes back to its predecessor, the Integrated Planning Act at some stage as well. Look, another really good text, probably along the same lines of Bates, is Fisher's publication, Thomson Reuters. That's a really good commentary, really good text. If you want to look at more in terms of the international side of things, for those of you that are really interested in marine, the Great Barrier Reef, you know, those sorts of Commonwealth issues, then probably this one. That's the Principles of International Environmental Law, Sands and Peel. It's very comprehensive, it's a very detailed text, but it's also very good. If you want something a bit shorter, quite a bit shorter, Dovers and Hussey have this Environment and Sustainability Policy Handbook. Now, I'd recommend that if you're involved in policy framing and implementation. So we'll have a wide range of interests in this course, but that's very good. It's quite short, so that's easy. Now, a brand new one, which is an excellent read. It's this, also Federation Press, it's Lister and others, Environmental Planning Law in New South Wales. It's excellent. It's really well written, it's comprehensive, it's got a good mix of theory and practice. It's quite a large text as well. So that's probably along the lines of Bates and Fisher in terms of where it sits. A couple of short ones. We've got Environmental Law by Brad Jessup and Environmental Law by Rachel Baird. They're just little short ones, but handy little texts. This one by Jessup is really case summaries. I actually like this one by Baird. It's a nutshell series, and that's a really good one. If you just want to have a very short commentary to read on the run, I actually take this one into court quite often. So if I've got a delay, I'll just flick through that and highlight it. I'm big on highlighting. But probably the best of all of them, if you wanted to buy one other one, and it's cheap, is this one, the Environmental Defenders Handbook, the Community Litigants Handbook rather. And that's great because it's very practical based. So that's well worth the read, and that's from the Environmental Defenders Office. It's quite cheap, and depending on your persuasion, it's worth promoting the cause as well. Speaking of the Environmental Defenders Office, in the last iteration of the course that I did for the law school, which was environmental law, we had an excellent presentation through the Environmental Defenders Office, and I'll upload that material for you as well. Okay, now I know I'm speaking very quickly and I'm moving pretty fast, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to unmute your microphone and to ask any questions through the chat facility as well. All right, so the first week we're dealing with Chapter 1 of Bates. It's a good introduction. I've got my summary, of course, that I've mentioned on Moodle, and you'll be able to access that. Firstly, you need to understand the importance of the primary sources of law, and I assume that some of you have had some legal training, others may not, but when we talk about primary sources of law, I'm really talking about legislation and case law. So, and legislation overrides case law. Case law is the law that is made by judges particularly. And in the hierarchy of legislation, Commonwealth overrides state where there's a clear conflict. That's a constitutional issue. So what are the key pieces of legislation? I've already mentioned one in the Queensland context, which is the Sustainable Planning Act 2009. So if you're going to look at one piece of legislation in Queensland, have a look at the Sustainable Planning Act. There are others, we'll talk about others in the course, such as the Vegetation Management Act, the Nature Conservation Act, the Environmental Protection Act, and the State Development and Public Works Organisation Act. So they're the key pieces of legislation. I'm pretty sure that I've got those listed in Moodle somewhere. If not, I'll make a point. I'll add to that. I've got to remember to do these things when I promise I'm going to do them. At a state level, they're the important acts in Queensland. Feel free to look at legislation in your state if you're out of Queensland. Commonwealth, by far the most important piece of legislation in the context of environmental law, is the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. I'll refer to it simply as the EPBCA throughout this course, but there are others. The regulations that go with the EPBCA, the Commonwealth Criminal Code, the Administrative Decisions Judicial Review Act, and the Constitution. And you think, why are we talking about the Constitution in environmental law? Well, partly because there's a question about that in the first assessment piece. So you need to know it to get some marks. And secondly, to understand how environmental law fits into the scheme of things. You see, the Commonwealth has power to make laws in relation to that which it is given power under the Constitution. So the Commonwealth can't just make laws about anything. You'd think they might, but they can't. So the Commonwealth can only make laws in relation to what it is empowered to do constitutionally. So have a look at section 51 of the Constitution, and you'll see there's a list of powers enumerated. Commonwealth can make laws in relation to banking, foreign affairs, trade and commerce, etc., etc. If you look through that list, you'll see some really interesting things. One is that there's nothing to do with environment. And you'd think that's really important. But in 1900, bear in mind, there really was no such thing as environmental law. Environmental law is only about 40 years old. It kind of started in the 70s. Another subject that I take at the university is alternative dispute resolution, and that's kind of new as well. That's kind of a 70s creation. So when they created the list, nobody thought about environmental law, and yet we have the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. And it's really interesting how that came into play, because when the Commonwealth started to enact environmental-based laws, various states, the Tasmanian dam case is a really good example, various states challenged that law to say it's beyond the power of the Commonwealth to make this environmental-based law. It went progression of cases to the High Court. Murphy-Orrs is another one, which is to do with Fraser Island, Murphy-Orrs case, Tasmanian dam case. They're really important cases. Anyway, the point was that the states challenged the validity of these Commonwealth laws. The High Court said, no, even though there's no environmental law, no ability to make environmental law per se, the fact that these environmental laws also relate to things like foreign affairs or trade and commerce means that we will allow it to be enacted. So eventually, after being knocked around in the 80s, particularly in the High Court, the states and the Commonwealth got together through COAG. I think it was 1992 in Brisbane, there was a meeting, and as a result of that COAG meeting, the states essentially allowed the Commonwealth powers to do certain things in a more cooperative manner. And you'll see that throughout the course, where, for example, there's a bilateral agreement regime when it comes to environmental impact assessment. Don't worry, let a few things go over your head at the moment, because this will all make more sense as we progress through the course. Okay, I've been doing a lot of talking. No questions at this stage? We're all good? I'm looking at all the faces. Everybody's going, yes, this is easy peasy. All right. So you've got an idea of the primary sources of law, legislation, and then case law. Now, well, where do we find our cases? In the Commonwealth sphere, probably the Federal Court, maybe the High Court, but Federal Court. In the Queensland context, when it comes to, say, the planning and environment aspect, the Planning and Environment Court is the important one. Now, the P&E Court is actually part of the District Court. So in Queensland, in the hierarchy of state courts, we have the Court of Appeal, which is a division of the Supreme Court. And then we have the Supreme Court itself, the Trial Division. So the Supreme Court is in two branches, the Court of Appeal and the Trial Division, but essentially the Supreme Court. Below the Supreme Court, we have the District Court. Below that, we have the Magistrates Court. And kind of below it, but also off to the side, tangentially, is the tribunal where I'm a member, the Queensland Civil and Administrative Tribunal. But in Queensland, a lot of the environmental court law courses, or cases rather, are dealt with through the Planning and Environment Court. And that's really, it's constituted by district court judges. And I spent a lot of time in the district court, so you actually get to know some of these judges, and it's really good to be able to talk to them about some of these matters that they deal with. So have a look at the Planning and Environment Court. Now, I'm going to ask for some help here. Has anyone started to research legal matters like primary sources of law, legislation and case law? And if so, where do you look to find these primary sources? Is anyone willing to unmute their microphone and tell us, or use the chat facility? So I'll break it down. Has anyone studied any primary sources of law, legislation or case law? I'm getting no. Oh, you're going to love this course. We've got a lot to cover. All right, so here's the first little bit of a shock. If you're going to do this course properly, you can't rely just on the textbook. you have to actually go and have a look at the legislation, and you have to go and have a look at the cases. Oh, more reading. But it's fun. And it's an open book exam, so you'll be able to take these things in to the exam with you. All right, during the course, I'll show you how to access the legislation and the case law, but in the material, there is some notes about where I think you should go to look. Let's see if we can find it. Yeah, it's probably in the notes. I wrote all the notes, rewrote them all last year, so they're all right up to date at the moment. But things like AUSTLI, AUSTLII, is great. So go and have a look at AUSTLI if you want to do some homework in terms of just fiddle around with that, see if you can find the Commonwealth legislation, the state legislation, and some case law. So there's the Planning and Environment Court in Queensland. That deals with planning appeals. And it deals with what we call merits appeals. A merits appeal is really interesting. It's administrative law, and it's where, let's say, a decision maker makes a decision to reject an application for a particular proposal, or to approve the application but on conditions that somebody doesn't like. Then if you're an eligible applicant, you can lodge an appeal for to the Planning and Environment Court, and the Planning and Environment Court in a merits appeal will actually step into the shoes, as we say, step into the shoes of the decision maker and make the correct and preferable decision. So it's a merits review is essentially saying, all right, decision maker, you're out, Planning and Environment Court, you're in, you make the decision. And we say the correct and preferable decision. I deal with merits reviews in a different sphere, in the QCAT, in the tribunal. I hear merits reviews in relation to things like blue card applications. Somebody gets knocked back on a blue card, then it goes to the tribunal, and someone like me will make a decision as to what it should be. So that's the same principle. That's a merits review. If you have a look at the material further down the track through the course, you'll see where I've given you a sample of how to lodge, how to prepare an actual notice of appeal, because I do try and make this a bit practical so that you can actually do something as opposed to talk about the theory, if you know what I mean. I mean, as great as my university education was, it is, I guess, what is now a competitor at the University of Queensland. When I finished after 7 years of study, I really couldn't do very much in terms of practical side of things. A mountain of theory, but I want to emphasise a few practical things here as well during this course. So if you have a look at the Planning and Environment Court, that'll give you an idea of where the cases are heard in relation to state planning issues in Queensland, and it will give you an idea of the secondary source of law in terms of case law. Bear in mind also the importance of alternative dispute resolution as part of the process. And while we've been talking, I found where it is that there's some information about accessing legislation and case law, which I call primary sources of law. That's in week 2 on Moodle, and I've referred to ComLaw, the Office of the Parliamentary Counsel, AUSTLI, which I mentioned before, Barnett Jade, and courts' websites. So that's probably all I propose to talk about tonight. A gentle introduction to the course. I've probably caught you off guard by closing pretty quickly and on the end. I will make a few more comments. There's a few things that I've overlooked in my notes here. Each week there will be some problems. There's the reading, of course. I'd really like it if you stay ahead. So do your reading for week 2 in week 1 and so on. Try to prepare a response to the problem, upload that into Moodle. Think about the assessments now. Think about the exam straight away. Provide a document to yourself as to where you're going to keep it. I'm just going to gallery view, if that's all right. Think about where you're going to keep your notes for the exam. I always like to work backwards and think about what the exam might be and then go from there. Write persuasively. Remember, of course, there's not necessarily a right or a wrong answer. That's one of the great things about law. It's not like the sciences generally, where there might be a specific right or wrong answer. Here, I'm much more interested in the argument. So I may come to a completely opposite conclusion to you in relation to a certain legal matter, but I might still award you a high distinction. Does that make sense? And if you think about it, in the High Court, very often you'll see decisions where it's a split decision. 4 judges go one way, 3 go the others. They're in the dissent. But that doesn't mean that their answer is necessarily ill-founded. It's just they've taken a different view. And law is a bit like that. So there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. And what it flows from that you must be wary of a simplistic answer. And conveyances are great. I don't know if we've got any conveyances in the course, probably not, but conveyances work really hard in law. They have such a difficult task, but bless their souls, sometimes they're just a little bit too keen to say this is what it is, because they're thinking about the conveyancing aspects and they don't think about the consumer protection or the contract issues or other issues that might have a bearing on the answer. So just be a bit more simplistic. Be aware of cautious of simplistic answers. It's the way in which you argue that's important to me. Well, look, it's probably clear from the material, but I really want you to write in a very simple manner. Not too simple in the sense that I have an aversion to abbreviated language, so please don't put in didn't or it's or, whatever, wasn't. Do was not. But please don't write in a pompous manner either. It's not the way we teach law anymore. So I like using short sentences. Have a look at my sample document. I think you'll find it at the bottom of the first page of Moodle. So rather than me trying to describe what it is, yeah, there it is. At the bottom of the landing page, as I call it, of Moodle, you'll see a thing called John Milburn sample document. If you've got some time, it's actually worth a read for the content as well as a guide to how I set out my papers as well. Now, during this course, it's likely that you will want to look at some videos. As I said, I've been doing this for a while, so some of these videos relate to previous iterations of the course or similar courses. And you'll see videos from QCs, there's one from Judge Moore's own. Rod Lister QC. Now, that's a really important one because the first assessment that you've got relates to the Predajon case. Here I am. I said just a minute ago I was finished and I lied already to you. I'm just going to share the screen for a minute and have a look at the first assessment piece. Now, you should be able to see that now. That's the second assessment. I'll bring the first one across if I can find it. There it is. Okay, so the first assessment piece, due I think on the 5th of May. I hope these things are internally consistent. Double check. Yeah, 5th of May. All right, it's in 2 parts. The first part relates to a description, a commentary about the Predajon case. This is a really interesting case. It's a little bit old, it's 2012. You'll see it's the Queensland Planning and Environment Court, QPEC. And this was Judge Everson who came to the decision. Essentially, as you'll read, it was a case where an application was considered in the context of environmental law to do with a really environmentally sensitive area of Queensland. And it's interesting how the judge had to consider the international environmental law principles like the precautionary principle and try to map that in with the planning scheme for the area. So enjoy reading that case. But the reason I'm mentioning it now, apart from the fact that you should start to think about it now, is that one of the QCs that argued that case, Predajon, is Rod Lister QC, who's very well known and well regarded in Queensland. And one of the YouTube videos, you'll see it further down in the course, is essentially an interview between, a discussion between me and Rod in relation to that case. So if you want some insight into the case and not just read the case, then I'd urge you to look at that commentary. Look, while I'm on that first assessment piece, the second thing you'll see is more an essay-based discussion. It's only short, 650 words, and I want you to consider the legislative basis for the Commonwealth to pass environmental related laws. Well, we've already talked about that tonight, so you're off to a head start. So think about how it is that the Commonwealth can make environmental related laws when it has no power in the Constitution to do that. And really, to answer the question properly, you'll need to have a look at the Constitution, maybe consider some of those constitutional cases like the Tasmanian Dams case, the Murphy-Orr's decision that relates to Fraser Island. Also have a look at COAG and think about the cooperative arrangements that came into place at that time as well. Okay, so that's the first assessment piece. If there's any questions, let me know. Second assessment piece is due a few weeks later, the 26th of May. Now, this is a different emphasis, and what I want you to do is a case study involving the Chinastone Coal Project application. To do that, you will need to consider the Coordinator General's project's website. We'll have a look at all this during the course. We'll go to different websites and I'll show you some background material. But why not go and have a look at that now, have a look at that first assessment, and just get a feel for it.
Could I just ask a question about assessment 1 again?
What was that, sorry? You want me to go back to
I just want, it's just that what you've got for part A is on the screen is different from what's on Moodle.
Oh, okay.
It talks about the Exerbia Property Finance Proprietary Limited against Fraser Coast Regional Council.
Right. Thank you very much. Let me have a look at that because I may have just called up last year's assessment. My apologies. So I'm sorry. Let me clarify that exactly. In fact, what I'll do, we'll go straight to Moodle. I think what I did, I actually probably changed my mind. There it is. It's a different one. Forget Predator John. That's not the assessment. Not the Exchequer Property Finance. I know what I did. I changed my mind. Thank you so much, Madonna, for raising that issue with me. It's essentially the same type of exercise. Oh, and then you've got the Hydrox nominees as well. Oh, I left part C. And I didn't do you any favours, did I? I changed it from 2 questions to 3. Sorry. But thank you for doing that. So forget the Predator John case. It's not that. It is this one here. Oh, off to a great start. Thank you. All right. And from now on, I'm looking at what's on the Moodle. I'm going to forget my notes. All right. Now, on that note, what I would like you to do is read your material for next week. Ask any questions through UCrew. Consider Ostly or one of the other websites to navigate around legislation and case law. And have a look at the assessment piece, the actual assessment, not what I'm necessarily telling you, but the actual assessment, and try and work your way backwards in terms of how you're going to create an answer to those problems, and bear in mind the comments at the start that I'm not too keen on giving extensions. So, are there any questions that anyone has? And thank you, David. You identified that the assessment piece I was showing you is wrong as well. So hopefully I've corrected that, and thank you for raising that issue with me. Okay. All right, are there any questions? And I love the mural, Joe, that you've got there. It's a beauty. Okay. Well, we might wrap it up at that. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Hopefully you can join me each week. Look, occasionally I may push the time back. Part of the reason for that is I may be stuck in court doing certain things. And partly, some people can't make 6 o'clock, so if I toss it back to 7:30 just once or twice, that will give them an opportunity to join us as well. All right, but otherwise, thank you for joining us, and I'll And Joe, the Zoom sessions for me ideally go for 20 minutes, but sometimes I can't help myself and they go for 40 minutes or 50 minutes. But I try and make it 20 minutes, but let's see. Is there a preferred time? Anyone have a view on how long the session should go?
Do you ask how long it would go for or what time we should have it at?
Yeah, no, how long, the length of time. What do you think is a good length of session? I'm told try and keep it short, otherwise we lose interest. So that's why I try to make it 25 minutes.
Yeah, I reckon you've done a pretty good time tonight, John. It's like, yeah, what was that, 20 minutes tonight, was it?
Probably, maybe a bit more.
45.
A bit more?
A bit more, yeah.
More.
All right. Well, I'll try and make it about that length of time. And we use UCrew to have a lot of discussions during the week as well. Okay, well, I'll end the meeting now. Thank you very much for joining us. All the best. See you next week.
See you guys.
Thanks, John.